Hello and welcome to English 2450, COM 2010, Week 4, lecture video number 2 on the 4 major features of lighting. I am going to be toggling back and forth between this Prezi and between some clips, images, and links, both of which are available on Canvas. So if you need to go back into the Prezi or the links to click through them on your own time, they're both available for you to do so. And obviously feel free to pause, rewind, rewatch this video as needed. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the 4 major features of lighting, which are quality, direction, source, and color. And in lecture video number 3 for this week, I'll be talking about some major styles of lighting as well. So let's start with quality. Now, when I refer to quality of lighting, really what it's broken down into are these 2 different options, which are hard and soft lighting. Now, hard lighting has clearly defined shadows, crisp textures, and sharp edges. This is typically very kind of harsh or unflattering lighting. Soft lighting is a more diffused illumination. The edges are a little bit softer, the textures aren't quite so harsh or crisp, and the edges are kind of a little bit dulled or blurred. So I have an example here of a side-by-side comparison of photos of the same woman, same exact pose basically, but the main difference is in the lighting that's used. So the image here on the left is hard lighting, and you can tell it's hard based on how hard these shadows are. You'll see the shadow along her nose is a very sharp line. Wrinkles and flaws are kind of more apparent. Our attention is drawn to them more. And then when we go to this image here on the right, obviously we're dealing with a much kind of softer and more diffuse lighting. It's more flattering. Wrinkles are less apparent. Shadows are less apparent. And the overall image just looks more kind of even in terms of how it's lit, rather than very dark shadows and bright light areas. You've got a kind of more even and soft and diffuse image throughout. And sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between hard and soft lighting. In this particular instance, the series of photos was taken to explicitly show, different types of lighting, how some are more flattering than others. But the idea of hard versus soft lighting is more of kind of a spectrum and can be a little bit hard to determine in the moment when you're watching a film. For the most part, films are going to use a more soft or diffuse lighting, so as to not draw attention to kind of like flaws or wrinkles or things like that. Unless it's doing it for a specific kind of artistic effect, hard lighting is pretty commonly avoided. So that's quality of lighting, hard or soft, whether it's diffused or sharp and kind of harsh. Now, the second feature of lighting is direction. And when I say direction, I'm referring to the path that the light takes from the source of the light to the object being lit. So the direction of the light from its source to the thing that's being lit. In most cases, you're not going to have an object being filmed, and this can be an actor or a piece of the set or a prop or whatever it is, that's only being lit by one single source from one single direction. Typically, you're going to have a lot of different lights that are surrounding an object that's being lit, which we'll talk about a little bit more in video number 3. However, sometimes one of these lights might be much, much stronger than some of the other lights, which gives the impression that the light is all coming from one specific direction. So you don't actually need to see a diagram or a behind the scenes image of where the light is coming from to tell which direction it's coming from. You can just look at a still image or a clip from a film and get a general idea if directional light is being used, where that light or the primary source of light seems to be coming from. So here I have this broken down into 5 different directions that a path of light might take from its source to its object. Frontal lighting, the light is in front of the object, and it tends to make an image look pretty flat and eliminate shadows. Side lighting comes from the side of an object and it sculpts the features. Backlighting comes from behind the object and creates a silhouette. Underlighting comes from below the object, and it tends to distort features. And top lighting comes from above the object being lit and creates a kind of spotlight or halo effect. Now, the easiest way to really grasp what directional lighting is to just look at images and examples. I have some examples here. So this image from Metropolis is an example of frontal lighting. You can tell that the actress is lit mainly from the front, that the light would be somewhere in front of her because it creates this very kind of flat, almost two-dimensional looking image where there aren't any really strong shadows. Everything just looks very kind of the same, right, across. There might also be some top lighting going on here because there's a bit of a halo effect too, but this is a good example of what frontal lighting looks like. Now, side lighting, we can tell that this particular image has side lighting because we only really see fully one side of the object being lit, in this case, Leonardo DiCaprio, I believe from the film Inception. We can tell, even without seeing a lighting rig, that the lighting is coming from somewhere over here. Now, we can tell that because this half of the object is far brighter than this half of the object. So ideally, we would, expect that the lighting would be coming from over here somewhere. And as I said before, the side lighting sculpts the features on one side and obscures the features on the other side. So that is an example of side lighting. Now, backlighting is where the source of light is behind the object, in this case Hugh Jackman in the film Logan, and it creates this really kind of interesting looking silhouette, but it also sort of obscures some of the features. You don't get the details very well. We can tell, okay, there's an eye and a nose, and he's wearing a shirt underneath a suit jacket, but you don't get a lot of fine details. You really just get a striking kind of silhouette because the light is primarily coming from behind. So that's an example of backlighting. Underlighting is pretty commonly thought of as like horror movie lighting. So you'll have like maybe a flashlight or a lighter or something like that. Underneath, typically the object being lit is a face, and it distorts the features. Everything looks kind of wonky or off center. It really draws attention to like the eyebrows and the chin and the kind of cold breath. While distorting some of the other features. So this is underlighting. The lighting is coming from under the object being lit. Top lighting is basically the opposite, right? You have a light that's coming down from above. In this case, it creates this kind of spotlight or halo effect while obscuring everything kind of below the face. It creates these really kind of sharp shadows on the cheekbones. The hands are almost completely obscured. You can't see anything of the chest or really the background over here because the light is solely focused on just creating kind of this halo or spotlight of the face and the hair. So that's directional lighting, when the light takes a specific path from its source to the object being lit to create a particular effect. Now, source refers to where the light is actually coming from in any given shot. So one important thing to remember here is that the majority of lighting for any given scene in a film does not come from within the mise-en-scène. If you're looking at a shot that contains like a lamp or a candle or a lighter or a flashlight, the majority of the lighting, even if it seems to be coming from that object within the mise-en-scène, is actually from the studio lights, from the lights that are not part of the mise-en-scène, but are specifically rigged up in order to illuminate the shot. So although some lighting, some small amount of lighting, might come from an actual part of the mise-en-scène, a character holding a flashlight, a candle on a dinner table, the majority of the light actually comes from the studio lights. Any subject within a film requires two light sources, typically speaking. You've got a key light and a fill light. And key light and fill light are essentially exactly what they sound like. A key light is key. It is central. It is primary. It is the one that provides the dominant illumination and it casts the strongest shadows. The key light is the most important and powerful light on a given subject in a film. Now, the fill light's also really important, but it's less intense illumination. It fills in. It fills in or softens or eliminates those shadows that are cast by the key light. So you might have a key light coming at an object from one direction, a fill light coming at a slightly different direction in order to create a less kind of overall harsh or strong shadow sort of image. By combining those two lights, the key and the fill, and adding other sources within the mise-en-scène or the studio lights, lighting can be controlled like scientifically, very exactly, in order to show us exactly what the director, the DP, the visual designer want us to see, and obscure exactly what they don't want us to see. So lighting within film is very much a science. Another aspect to think about when we think about lighting within film is color, because lighting can also affect our perception of color. Now, most commonly, directors are using pure white lighting. The lighting that's set up in the studio is typically just standard kind of pure white lighting. It's much brighter, obviously, than the lighting in your home or in the classroom, but it's typically white light. Color filters can be used, though, for specific effects. So orange is often used for candlelight or a fireplace, for example. So I have an image here that shows orange filtered light. This is from the Stanley Kubrick film Barry Lyndon. And you see this even orange tint kind of across the entire image here, which gives the impression that all of the lighting in this shot is coming from these candles in the foreground. However, it's really the off-screen studio cameras with the orange tint that's causing that effect and kind of so evenly illuminating everything in this image here. Now, another interesting kind of connection between color and lighting is when films use neon lighting, as in this example here from Blade Runner, where you have pink and blue neons behind Deckard, which kind of cast him in a very interesting color here. There's also a Twitter page that I have linked here called Neon Cinema. Unfortunately, I believe it's no longer active and it doesn't have very many tweets, but it does show some really interesting screenshots of directors and cinematographers that have used neon lighting to really interesting effects in different films across the last couple decades. So do take a minute to peruse that Twitter feed when you have a moment. So the use of color lighting is also really kind of an interesting part of film. Filters can be used for different effects. Neon can be used for different color patterns and effects. And another thing to keep in mind is that when we talk about lighting and we talk about the color of lighting, we're not only talking here about live action films. Animated films also have to be aware of color and lighting. In animation, lighting effects are created by hand or by using software, and those techniques usually try to strike a balance between realism, between how light actually looks in the real world, and between formalism, which is putting the art and the storytelling first. So I do have a link here at the bottom of week 4. Let me scroll down here to Neon Cinema, which is the Twitter feed I was just talking about, and a video that's a portion of a TED Talk called The Science of Light in Pixar Films. Now, that's just a couple minutes long, but it's really worth watching because it talks about how Pixar animators, especially for the film Finding Nemo, were able to use a blend of science and artistry to create a lighting effect that works very well for the story that they're trying to tell. So that's everything I have for video number 2 for week 4 lighting. Do stay tuned for video 3 where we'll be talking about different styles of lighting.